and welcome to Post Sports Live. I'm Gene Wang. There's a lot to sort out after a very busy week. Fortunately, we have an eager panel waiting to help us do just that.
Very eager.
Starting with Dan Steinberg in the first chair, the original DC Sports blog and sports columnist. In the middle seat, making her debut on Post Sports Live, Chelsea Janes, who's part of our 1-2 punch on the Washington Nationals beat. And to my left, from the early lead and the commissioner of the Optimator Fantasy Football League in the Post Sports Department,
right.
Des Bieler. Welcome. Welcome. What do we talk about today? I'm glad you asked because we have a lot for you. First, we're going to start off with what else? The big game, the Super Bowl, specifically looking at the New England Patriots. Then we'll bring it back, the conversation back to the nation's capital with a look at the Washington Nationals, who have been wheeling and dealing. And then at the halfway points of their seasons, the Washington Wizards and the Washington Capitals. And finally, we'll look at a couple of our local men's basketball teams who are having some early season success. But off the top, it's the Super Bowl. We know it's going to be the Seattle Seahawks and the New England Patriots, but whenever the Patriots, it seems like, are involved in the postseason, there's always some drama. Now we have Deflategate on the heels of, not really on the heels of, but as part of their history, Spygate. So my question for you, Dan, to start off is that, do these instances or shenanigans diminish what the Patriots have accomplished?
No, I don't think so. I think there's maybe multiple questions here. One is whether you kind of look at them a little bit askance as an organization or Bill Belichick as a coach. And I think if they are, found guilty of tampering with the balls and somehow punished in some way, you probably look at them a little bit differently in terms of respect. But I don't think it changes what you think about their accomplishments, because I don't think anyone thinks that they could have been playing with oblong balls or hexagonal balls or whatever. They were going to win that game. And so I don't think that in terms of, no one's going to say they don't deserve to be in the Super Bowl. I just think that cheating is kind of cheating, and you probably should try not to do that if they are found to have cheated.
Well, Chelsea, is there an asterisk in your mind by their accomplishments in the postseason?
I mean, I think if they've been cheating to this extent, people are very aware that they have this kind of reputation that this is something that's happening.
Right.
The NFL has to be looking for that, and sure, these incidents popped up, a couple just this postseason alone, but at the same time, they're doing that with what you would imagine would be increased scrutiny. I mean, no one's turning, a blind eye to this. So I would think that, what they've done, maybe you say, hey, they're, taking an outside route, but they're still doing it with the NFL, very aware that people think this way about them.
Well, the Patriots certainly are always a team that commands attention. It is a great story, Tom Brady 10 years after with Bill Belichick going back to the Super Bowl. But there's still this cloud over them, is there not, based on their history and the most recent, what's happened most recently?
It'll go on their record. I mean, it's really frustrating because now nobody's talking about the Pro Bowl. And I feel like...
Yeah, I know. We even forgot about that as a talking point.
Exactly. I mean, it's this Sunday. Come on, people. I think regardless of how this works out with the balls, and I don't think anything that much will really come of it, but it goes on the record. It'll be mentioned. When people talk about Belichick and they talk about the Patriots, they'll, of course, talk about Spygate. And they'll talk, what happened last week with the Ravens, I think, does seem a little sketchy. Like, it's within the letter of the law, but the way they went about it does seem possibly unethical. So,
wait, what?
Well, the way they ran up to the line. I mean, they had the ref announce a very unusual, ineligible, player in Vereen, and then they just kind of ran up the line and ran the play.
Well, that's why would you want to do it, right?
I agree, it's legal, but just because something's legal doesn't mean you can't sort of question it later and say, hey, that seems a little sketchy.
I think for all of this, I don't want to hijack your show, but I think for all of this,
that's why you're on the show.
I think that I'm sure that people will talk about this for years just because it's kind of funny and the name is funny, Deflategate and all that. But people are going to remember the first game a lot more than the second game, no matter what is found out with these.
But then we talked about this a little off camera. The Patriots won the game 45-7. Does a deflated ball have anything to do with the outcome?
Yeah, I think that if they are found to have cheated in some way, like you're not allowed to cheat. It doesn't matter what the score is. It doesn't mean they would have won. It doesn't mean they would have scored any fewer points or that the Colts would have scored any more points. It's just like if you have pine tar all up and down your bat and you win 27-0, it doesn't mean that.
Duck. That's an air raid warning. See, that means you're talking way too long, Dan.
Right.
Anyhow, I'll just throw in one last point to get us back on track here. That there's holding on every play in the NFL, right? Is that not illegal? If they don't catch it and you go on and you move on, then what's the difference?
Well, there are things that happen in every game, and then there are things like this that don't seem to happen very often. Yeah. So it is unusual, and I think it's just another way that people are going to be able to knock the Patriots down a peg. But if they win, I think they'll go down as the greatest dynasty in NFL history.
Well, It's interesting.
Wow.
It's interesting that you mentioned
Bust out a
greatest.
big one there at
Well,
the
Des,
end.
it's interesting that you mentioned greatest in history. That's a segue. Thank you very much, because
Thank
we're
you.
talking about the Washington Nationals starting pitching rotation. We know they added Max Scherzer. They landed the biggest free agent prize in the offseason. They've been very active. This comes on the heels of a deal that sent Tyler Clippard to the Oakland A's for Yusel Escobar, a middle infielder. So I'll ask this of you, Chelsea. Should fans temper their expectations despite this great rotation, given that the Nationals have had their troubles in the postseason?
I think that this rotation, I think it's been proven over the past few years. I mean, if the Kansas City Royals can be within a game of a World Series, I think it's kind of all bets off in the playoffs. I think any expectations you have going to the playoffs need to be kind of wiped clean. I think expectations should not be tempered for the regular season. I mean, with this rotation, there's really no excuse for anything less than what they did last year, which was 96 wins and a division title. I mean, anything less than that would be really kind of a staggering disappointment, I think. But again, playoff time, yeah, this is the best chance they've ever had, but things go crazy there. You know, it's just,
Yeah, as we've seen.
Yeah.
Well, Des, we've seen a lot of greatest rotations ever that have not done much in the postseason.
Yep.
Should fans temper their expectations given what we've seen of the Nationals and some of the collapses they've had?
I mean,
Collapses.
Yeah, come on. Yeah, yes. You
some
know
of the
what I'm
collapses.
talking. Yeah.
The Nats.
Yes.
Well, I mean, if the fans' expectations haven't been tempered already by what's happened with the Nats, I mean, I don't think anything we say is gonna do that for them. You know, if fans want to go crazy with this, then go crazy. It's a long season anyway. You might as well start excited and try to stay excited. I mean, I think, yeah, you know, you have to look at the Nats bullpen and say, okay, well, if all these guys get to the postseason and then all throw complete games, you got nothing to worry about. But you know, you still have Storn back there. You got rid of Clippard. You know, I think there are a lot of reasons to say that, hey, maybe they won't get to the World Series. I mean, anything can happen in the postseason.
Well, yeah, Dan, isn't it the case that in the postseason your rotation's shortened anyway? So if you have 5 great guys, that's fine over 162. But when you're playing a shorter series, does that really make a difference?
No, of course you're right. And last year in like August, we were all saying that the AL was going to either be the A's or the Tigers because of their crazy pitching.
Yeah.
Obviously, it was neither of those teams. So, I mean, of course you're right, but this is not a move that is made, and I think that almost anyone would agree, it's not a move that's made for 2015 or for the 2015 postseason. This is like setting up a lot of moving pieces in the future, and it gives the Nats incredible flexibility on a lot of different fronts. You know, we don't know what this team would have looked like in 2016 without this move, but we know that there were a lot of guys who possibly could be leaving, and now you have one solid piece that's going for 7 years into the future. I don't think we know what Max Scherzer is going to be like 7 years from now, which is a huge question mark, but at least we know he's going to be here.
Well, Chelsea, let me ask you this in reference to what Dan just said about this not being necessarily a move for 2015. Is it not out of the realm of possibility to think that Ted Lerner, who is 85, tells Mike Rizzo, look, I want a championship now. Go get Max Scherzer. Whatever else happens, we'll deal with it then.
quite honestly, I think that's a very realistic possibility.
Yeah.
I kind of disagree. I think this is sort of an all-in for 2015 signal. I think the Escobar-Clipper trade was the same thing. I mean, yes, Escobar gives them flexibility at short in case you lose Desmond after this year, but he also is an upgrade at a position where they didn't need one. They didn't need a great second baseman to go win 96 games. It wouldn't matter. But they went and got him anyway.
Well, he's not a great second baseman.
Right. But he's better than what they had.
He's better than what they had. Okay.
So they didn't need like a minimal upgrade at a kind of irrelevant position, I guess. Not irrelevant, but and they do need to bolster the bullpen. That's really important. But again, if they're willing to spend $210 million on Scherzer, you have to imagine they're willing to go out and get another arm to kind of back up some of these young guys that they have a lot of faith in. So I definitely think it's a signal that somebody in that organization is willing to spend, and it's probably the people at the top.
So Des,
Ted Lerner. Whatever. I don't
go ahead, Dan. No, you have something to say.
I don't want to have any kind of speculation about his lifespan or anything like that. It just seems like his character. What we know about his character is not someone who decides that he's going to go crazy for one all-out push in one season. You know what I mean? He seems like a pretty rational, conservative kind of character. And to me, you make this move if you think that Jordan Zimmerman's not going to be on your team moving forward, and that this gives you another arm.
Does this mean, Chelsea, this means that Roark goes to the bullpen along relief? Is that kind of what's the writing on the wall?
For now, but I mean, no one's ever had all 5 starters, make all their starts and never have to go to that. And having a guy who had 15 wins last year as your 6th starter is just stunning. And yeah, I agree. I mean, I think this is a smart way to go all in for 2015 because it bolsters you long term. Again, if you lose Zimmerman,
and they could still trade Zimmerman, I suppose.
Exactly.
Yeah, so Roark would be right back in there.
Is that what do you think the likelihood of that is, Chelsea, that they do move Zimmerman?
I think if they get blow them away offer of prospects, then they'll do it. They can. They have the flexibility, but I don't think it's a done deal for any means.
The question now everyone is asking, or a lot of people are asking, is now with this rotation that's very, very deep, who gets the ball on opening day? And Chelsea, I'll toss it again to you. Who starts?
Man.
I mean,
take
you
your
don't lose
pick.
any. You don't lose
Take
with
your
any
pick.
choice, but
Yeah.
someone has to get the ball.
I mean, I'd like to think maybe they'd go to a guy who's been here a while. I don't necessarily think they toss it to Scherzer right away, but he's a 2013 Cy Young Award winner, so it's not. I mean, your pick. It's
Just
crazy.
getting $210 million also.
Right. Exactly.
So,
exactly.
It sounds like that you think Scherzer should
No, I
be the
think it'll
guy.
be Strasburg. I think it'll be Strasburg because it's always Strasburg. Every time we come up with an argument for why someone other than Strasburg could be opening day starter or this could start game one of the playoffs, they always go back to Strasburg. I think there's kind of like a, I don't know, ego, but it's sort of like his place in this team. He is the number one starter, and I don't see that that's changing.
Well, how about this thinking that maybe Strasburg walks and goes back to the West Coast? We know he's a West Coast guy. He loves San Diego. Would you not want to start a guy that you know is going to be here for the long term, and that may be Max Scherzer? What do you think about that, Des?
I think it's Strasburg. I think Dan's right for once, and I think
Oh,
shot.
shot off the bow.
It's his show. I gotta take him down a
do,
peg. I
that's
have
right.
to temper his expectations again. And no, it's Strasburg. Yeah, I think the team is invested in him. Maybe he walks, but for the time being, I think they still want him to be a face of the franchise. I agree. He's kind of the de facto number one guy, and I think it's easier just to put him in that slot. You'd create more of a controversy by putting anyone else in there, and I don't think they want to go down that road just yet.
But is it controversial to have someone who's making $210 million be your number one guy on opening day? I mean, I don't know if
It'd be
anyone.
a lot of like, oh, what does this mean about Strasburg? What does this mean about Strasburg's future?
Yeah, there'd be
a lot
people
of
like us talking about it all day long.
It'd be easier to just stick with the guy that you've had.
But do you put any credence into thinking that Strasburg may walk and they want to have someone here who fans can get on board with for the long term instead of a guy who's just going to be here for one more year and then be gone?
I don't know that fans really factor into this at all, honestly.
But didn't you just say a second ago, everyone's going to say, oh, what does it mean to the team that Strasburg is not starting on opening day?
Yes.
So fans obviously do factor in. Is that not the case?
I just mean in terms of like jersey sales based on the opening day starter or anything like that. I think a lot of fans are kind of feeling like this team is changing really rapidly, and maybe they would even prefer to have the guy that they've known if it comes down to that.
Well, let's move on to another one of our locals who are doing very well, the Washington Wizards. At the season's halfway point, they are in second place behind the surging Atlanta Hawks, who seem at this point unbeatable. Des, I'll ask you this. Do you give the Wizards any chance of overtaking Atlanta for the top seed in the East at this point in the season?
I mean, I give them a chance. I mean, they're in second place, so they have the best chance of anybody left in the East to do it. But I don't think it's a great chance. I mean, they're 5 games back with 40 to play. So, and Atlanta's just playing so well. I mean, you do kind of wonder if Atlanta can keep it up and if they hit a losing streak, or obviously if somebody gets injured, I think then the Wizards can, and if the Wizards stay healthy, they can overtake them. But I don't think it's a great chance. I mean, the Wizards have, I think, 3 more road games to play than Atlanta does the rest of the way, and Wizards are 11-8 in the road, which is good, but it's not great. So I just think I'd give it maybe a 15% chance. I mean, I don't think it's a very high one.
Dan, can the Wizards get hot enough to catch the Hawks?
No, I mean, I think it'd be more likely. I kind of said the same thing last week. I think it'd be more likely that they would go down to the 3rd seed than they would go up to the 1st seed. And I think even with the way Cleveland's playing all of a sudden, I don't think it's out of the question that Cleveland could overtake the Wizards or certainly move up at least in the order. I mean, I think Atlanta's good. I think that for a while I was like, I don't know, but they're good, man. They're really good. They're well coached. They've got all kinds of pieces. And I think that the Wizards, a little bit old. I still think that Pierce and Nene are probably going to sit some games out at some point.
Clearly, yeah.
I don't think the Wizards are going to be the number 1 seed now.
Chelsea, do you see any shot of them overtaking Atlanta?
I mean, the Hawks have just played so well, as they've both said.
Yeah.
I mean, and I also think there is kind of a potential for them to drop off, and even if they do, I mean, you're getting into the part of the season where there is that grind, and the Wizards are aging, and like you say, some of their key pieces or key role players would kind of be the first to drop off if, health became an issue. So, I mean, I think it would be very, very tough, and Atlanta would have to go into a big tailspin, and so would some of the other teams to kind of open that door for the Wizards.
I mean, if Al Horford gets injured, which has happened many times in the past,
has.
I think it's a whole different equation. Obviously, you have Nene and you have guys in the Wizards who also can get injured. But I mean, I think that's the big scenario where the Hawks could really take a tumble. It happened to them just last year.
But to that point, though, do you not think the Wizards could weather some injuries better than the Hawks when you have guys like Chris Humphries and Otto Porter and Martell Webster now coming back? You can kind of plug those holes for a while better than the Hawks might be able to off the bench.
Yeah, I think the Wizards could weather any injury to anybody but Wall pretty well, to
Right.
any one guy. The Hawks, though.
Although Andre Miller gets it done when he gets on the court.
In his limited minutes.
Yeah, he is. No,
Yes,
agreed.
in his
I'm not
limited
saying it's going to be
minutes.
the long. I'm just saying if Wall
Right.
misses a couple games here and there. I mean, the
A
Wizards
couple,
are
okay,
better.
yeah.
Well, Dan, do you think the Wizards are better equipped to handle injuries than maybe for the Hawks are, given how strong their bench play has been?
I mean, I guess it probably depends who gets injured, but I don't know that. I don't know that. I think that playing one of the oldest players in the league 30 minutes a game is a recipe for long-term success.
No. Of course, we're not saying that, but we're talking about just in spots because we expect Nene at some point to either rest or be hurt, right? And they're going to give Pierce some
the
rest.
bench has been good. I mean, like Martell Webster hasn't played great since he's come back. I don't know what their plan with him is. Otto Porter is being a little bit more inconsistent probably than he was at the beginning of the year, not getting as many minutes, obviously. I mean, Humphries has been awesome. Humphries has been a revelation, but I don't know that. I don't know that you want your plan to be starters getting hurt.
Okay. Well, guys, we're going to move on to the Caps here, who have one game left until the All-Star break. They have lost consecutive games in regulation for the first time in more than a month. Chelsea, I'll start with you. Is that a concern at all for this team going into the break?
Well, I think it's sort of a grounding thing. I don't think it's necessarily a concern. I mean, I think they do have parts that they don't have. No one's thinking the Capitals are going to charge through to a Stanley Cup because they had this hot streak. I mean, This was going to happen. There are a lot of really good things happening. They're 2 one-goal losses too. I mean, they were right in that Nashville game the whole way. So I mean, I just think the things they've seen from Holtby, the way their defense is doing things, they're not relying so much on special teams. This is a different Caps team than last year. So two back-to-back one-goal losses are just sort of a regression to the mean,
Des, would you not though want to go into the break on a more of a hot streak, or has what they did before?
Gene,
but has what they have done before enough for you to make this not that much of a concern?
If they lose to the Oilers, then I think it's a concern. Then all of a sudden you've lost 3 in a row, and the last
went
one
to
was
a horrible team,
a horrendous team.
Yeah.
I mean, I think Chelsea's point is well taken. There had to be some regression. They went 14-1-4. Now they're 14-3-4 in their last 21 games or whatever it is. So I mean, still pretty good.
Yeah.
But by the same token, they just had this rather unsustainable hot streak, and now they could go on a cold streak. And if they do, they're in the 7th spot, I think, in the East. And it does look like the top 8 teams in the Eastern Conference have kind of separated themselves. But you have the Panthers are hanging around. I'm just saying, if the Caps do hit a cold spell here, they could fall out of the playoff spot. And then everyone would be freaking out here.
Well, Dan, what's your take on the consecutive regulation losses?
I think maybe the way the games went down made it a little bit more frustrating than it would have been otherwise. Because those are 2 good teams on the road that you lost. I think going in, if you had said you're going to lose both of those, it maybe wouldn't have even seemed that bad. But the fact that they came back from a 3 down against Dallas. They rallied against Nashville. Both those games, they really had a chance to steal at least 1 point, if not more. I think that made it a little bit more frustrating. But I've actually been surprised at some of the stuff they were saying. I think Barry Trotz was talking about this Edmonton game is almost a must-win, which to me is like, you guys are playing great right now. Like, this is just a tiny little blip. I wouldn't worry. I mean, to me, this is not like a must-win.
You would, but I think what he's saying is what Chelsea and Des referred to, is that you don't want to go into the break not just losing 3 in a row, but losing the last one to a really, really bad team.
Of course.
And that's why he's saying that.
Of course you don't, but just to me, like, things seem like pretty stable and pretty good right now.
I think in the Dallas, the loss to Nashville, I think was just fine. It's a great team. They were fired up to play Trotz. I think you can excuse any team for going there and losing. I think the Dallas loss is troubling because you had the backup goalie in there, and he's been terrible this season. So I think, if anything happens to Holtby, I think the Caps are in big trouble. And if he got a major injury, they'd probably have to swing a trade because Peters just looks not ready for it.
Well, has Holtby been the MVP in your mind to this point of the season, or
Absolutely.
Is it Ovechkin?
Holtby, I think, has been the Iron Man. I think he's 2nd in the NHL in minutes played. He's absolutely been the MVP of this team so far. And you just saw it in that game. Like, if Holtby goes, I think he's the most indispensable player on the team right now.
I think you could argue for Nicholas Backstrom, too.
You could, yeah. No, he's certainly in the mix. Okay, let's move on to some college basketball. We have 2 teams, Maryland and Georgetown, both leading their conferences after resounding victories. Let's start with the Terps. They have recently swept Michigan State. They're in first place in the Big Ten. Dan, are they going to be in first place at the end of the regular season? Should we expect that from them?
I mean, a lot of Maryland fans are kind of suggesting that right now. I would certainly guess that Wisconsin's still the best team in that league. Probably hasn't played as well as people would have thought recently, but I mean, Maryland is they're not a huge obstacles in their place to at least get like a double bye in the Big Ten tournament, which is pretty big to get one of those top 4 seeds.
It is.
I mean, they certainly look to be one of the 4 best teams in that league.
Is that you see that being the same, Chelsea? That Maryland's one of the 4 best teams in the league?
Oh, definitely. And I mean, they have Indiana at Indiana. That's going to be tough, but they don't have. I don't think they have to go to Wisconsin, play Wisconsin at all,
So
right?
So
they skip. They skip some big roadblocks that would be in their way. And I mean, they're clicking, and it just everybody seems to be stable. They seem to be pretty consistent. They dropped that game to Illinois. You thought, okay, maybe they're coming back. No, but they came right back, and then they rout Michigan State like Melo Trimble plays the game of his life. So, I mean, I think it's, or the first half of his life, I guess. I mean, I think they're doing pretty well. They have as good a shot as anyone.
Well, Des, you look at the Terps as a favorite for the regular season title?
I wouldn't say the favorite. It does kind of look like a two-team race right now. I mean, Indiana and Iowa, I guess, are hanging around, but I think Maryland and Wisconsin have, for the moment, separated themselves to a certain degree in the Big Ten. And but I still think you have to say Wisconsin is probably the favorite. I mean, they just lost to Rutgers, which was terrible, but they didn't have Frank Kaminsky for that game. He's back. And as Chelsea said, I mean, Melo Trimble went nuts in that Michigan State game, and he'd been shooting rather poorly in their previous Big Ten games. So I don't think we can expect that Melo, for all the games going forward by any means.
Well, let's move from College Park back to D.C. proper and Georgetown, who scored a monster victory over Villanova, 78-58, blew the number 4 team in the country out of the water to take over first place in the Big East. They were predicted second in the Big East in the preseason. After that win, Des, do you think they can win the Big East regular season title?
I definitely think they can win the Big East regular season title.
And should we expect them to win the Big East regular season title? How about that?
That's a different story. I still think, like Wisconsin, I still think Villanova, I mean, they get Georgetown at home in February, so we'll see how that goes. If Georgetown wins that game, then I think we can say, okay, they're probably going to take this thing. But I mean, the Big East is just, it's deeper. It's more competitive than I think people thought it was going to be coming this season. But it's
no
not,
question about it.
But it's certainly not top heavy. And Villanova, for the top team in the conference, is not that great, I don't think. I mean, they don't really have any NBA players, I don't think. They're a veteran team. But Georgetown has this great mix of veterans and freshmen, and they look very, very competitive.
Chelsea, does that win make you think that this team should be the favorite to win the Big East in the regular season?
I mean, I think it's interesting that their fans stormed the court because clearly they didn't expect it to happen that way. So I wouldn't say favorite is, I don't think anyone's really the favorite in that league. It's just, and like you were saying, it's not only is it not top heavy, but it's kind of tightly packed. I mean, no one's really separating. Villanova's probably the best one, and that game at Villanova will be really telling. But can they win? Sure, they can win. They showed that yesterday, but I don't necessarily think that means you should expect them to.
They were just a couple minutes away from losing to Butler at home the other day, too.
They were. But does that 20-point win change how you look at Georgetown in terms of being a favorite to win the Big East or not?
No.
I
would be surprised. I would be surprised if they won.
You would be surprised. So you still have Villanova as a team to.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if Butler won. Providence is young, but Providence is certainly playing well too. I mean, Georgetown's in the mix, but I think that there's enough other teams that I would be a little bit surprised if it winds up being the Hoyas.
Okay, well, Dan, thank you. You have the last word on that. Unfortunately, time has run out for us. Thanks for coming. Let's do it again soon. For Dan Steinberg, Chelsea Janes, and Des Bieler, I am Gene Wang. Remember to follow us on Twitter @PostSportsLive. Thanks for watching. We'll see you again soon.